Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Rob Simonds, and I'm the board president of the Downtown Chamber Series. And I'm joined today by Dominique Holley, a composer, a clarinetist, an arranger, and educator who'll be making his DCS debut on March 12th and 13th with his group, Driftwood Quintet, at Park Central. So welcome, Dominique.
Hello, I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited to have this concert and perform for everyone in this series. It should be fun.
We're excited to have you and excited to talk with you today. So first off, I think when most of us that have been coming to concerts for a long time think about woodwind instruments, we think about the woodwind quintet. But you guys are a reed quintet. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's different and how you guys are unique with your instrumentation and so forth?
Yeah, so a woodwind quintet, normally the instrumentation for that is normally flute, oboe, bassoon, clarinet, and French horn. And it has a bit more of a higher sound than us. We are, like as you said, a reed quintet. So our instrumentation is oboe, doubling on English horn, saxophone, doubling on alto and soprano, bassoon, bass clarinet, and then we have our clarinet player as well, who switches between B flat, A, and E flat clarinet as the pieces require. And like I said, the reed quintet, we have the bass clarinet, we have the saxophone, we have the bassoon. So we have a lot more low end, but we also have a lot more volume and power that we can create. And this group formation was actually started, I believe, back in the 70s with a group called Califax. They're literally the original reed quintet that started over in Amsterdam. And ever since and they're still out touring today. So they're a living group, and they have really set the bar for what reed quintets are capable of and what they can do.
It's really interesting. And beyond like the sonic quality of the quintet, you guys have a really interesting mission statement and value statement that your purpose is to entertain, but also to enrich community and to educate and drive social conversations. Can you tell us more what that's like in practice? Like how do you actually live that out?
So I think it starts from a very simple area, as someone who goes to a lot of concerts and likes hearing live music, when I went forward to make my own group that would go out in the community, I just wanted to make concerts that I myself wanted to go to, So if I can't imagine myself going to the concert that I'm programming, then I change what I'm doing. So in practice, for me, I think what I enjoy is when art can kind of imitate life, and can be reactive to the environment around you. And that can be in the way of your lived experiences, your current tastes, the popular culture around you. So all these different things go into the programming for our group. And it's not just my personal experiences. We try to fold in the experiences of the audiences we're playing for, the other members of the group. So it turns our programming into a very collaborative experience, especially over time. As we arrange more music that we program for later shows, we've developed this really extensive, varied program that we can pull from.
Yeah, I love that idea that you go to shows and you want to make the things that you'd want to see, and those are responsive to your tastes and to the audience's tastes. Is really interesting. I love and how the programming should imitate life. Can you tell us a little bit more specifically then about your arranging and maybe the choices you make around what you bring to the group and what you present to audiences?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I chose reed quintet as the ensemble I wanted to move forward with is two reasons. One, because I really like playing bass clarinet, and reed quintet is a vehicle that requires bass clarinet. And two, at the time, there wasn't a lot of music available for reed quintet that had been written, so it would force us to either commission or arrange pieces. We didn't really have money for commissions, so we went the route of arranging a lot of pieces. So for us, a lot of that arrangement, from my perspective, is programming a lot of Black composers, programming a lot of music that mixes genres a lot. We've done jazz pieces that aren't exactly jazz, but written in that jazz idiom. We've done concerts of video game and movie music, and all these things are stuff that I've gone to before and I've listened to. We've done concerts in the Valley where we hire other local groups that aren't even in our genre. We've done collaborations with, there's some local video game and movie music, jazz bands and rock bands that we've performed alongside. There's singers and soloists that we've arranged accompanimental pieces for lots of fun stuff.
Would you say that, you went to ASU to study clarinet, but you also
Mm-hmm.
have a formal background in jazz. Can you just talk a little bit more about how in the jazz tradition, arranging is more part of the tradition?
Yeah, so actually my like relationship to jazz has been very interesting because I started in classical. I wanted to do jazz band in high school, but the person leading the jazz band at that time, I only had clarinet, and they were very strict on what they wanted in their group. They wanted the saxophone, trumpet, those sorts of things. So I wasn't able to join it then. And when I was in school, towards the end of my education, I started taking some jazz piano classes. I joined one or two jazz combos. I took a jazz improv class, and I kind of kept up that method of like sideline studying that whole time. But in the world of arranging, jazz concerts and jazz bands and stuff, they all play a lot of the same tunes if they're not playing
Mm-hmm.
original music. And those tunes that they're playing, they're rearranging it for their group. If they want to change something, they change it. If I were to go to, I don't know, play the Mozart clarinet quintet, and I decided I wanted to change some of the parts around, people would light a fire, with pitchforks. So there's a lot more freedom in the world of expectations, and especially I think when we come back and we bring these jazz works to a classical audience, I think there's even more freedom because some of these jazz-inspired pieces might not necessarily please hardcore jazz fans who say, jazz is this, it's not that. So when we bring it into our world where it's like, hey, we're just playing all these different genres, we're just having fun, we just want to have an enjoyable concert experience that's different than what you might normally go to. It's fun to be able to say, hey, this piece, like the first piece on our concert, Homage to Duke, it was written by a classically trained musician who spent his life playing classical music. He played in Broadway shows. He did jazz on the side, and he's bringing what he knows from the jazz world into the classical world, so he can kind of help develop a new language and a new sound.
So we got kind of a sense of your musical upbringing and the things, the values that you bring to your performance now. How does that feed into your role as an educator? How do you pass this along to the kids that you're working with?
Yeah, it's always a world of experimentation. When I've done my private lessons, I try a lot to just cover things that I thought were lacking in my own education growing up. And a lot of that, as a classical musician, there wasn't a lot of focus on ear training before you get to college. It's not a lot of focus on ear training. There's not a lot of focus on transcription and learning things by ear. A lot of it is learn these scales, learn this rep, so you can go play this piece. So from an educating standpoint, I want to start by saying, hey, music should be fun.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not enjoying yourself, you're doing something wrong. At the end of the day. So when I work with kids, and this is for our Driftwood in general, we have a lot of educators in our group. Our bassoon player Ben Paley is a elementary music school teacher. He's been doing that for I think 5 or 7 years now. Right when he got out of school. Everyone else in our group has done private lessons in some capacity or another. So when we do Driftwood's educational outreach programs, we try to make sure that it's not the standard just come, play, leave kind of a thing. We try to make sure, hey, let's see how we can show kids music, make it relevant for them, make it fun, make it interactive, and ultimately inspire them to want to learn more about it, to want to be part of it. So we've done programs where we play Where the Wild Things Are, and we pair it with some Camille Saint-Saëns, the Carnival of the Animals. We've done musical ad libs where we play a segment. We took some music from a movie and we put it with this musical ad lib, and we said, hey, kids, in this section of the song, does this musical accompaniment sound more like a cave troll, a talking tree, or like a singing squirrel, And having kids really relate music and these instruments that they don't really see. Most kids have never seen an English horn before,
Mm-hmm.
And just getting them familiar with these concepts and bringing it to their world, I think is just one of the important things if you want people to be interested in these instruments and this art tradition as they grow older.
I love that sense of discovery that you're bringing to education, and you're bringing a sense of discovery in some ways with the programming. So you mentioned a minute ago that you're bringing some Duke Ellington. Certainly, Duke needs no introduction, but another composer on this program is Chevalier de Saint-George, who lived an incredible life and is really an interesting historical figure that we're rediscovering, I guess. Could you tell us a little bit more about his background?
Yeah, he was crazy, and it's funny how these figures come into our lives. I was fortunate enough when I was younger that my parents really had a focus on Black history and just history in general, you know. And when I was younger, I remember my dad had a book about prominent Black figures. And I remember when he was younger, he told me about this character, Joseph Bologne. And I'll admit, when I was younger, I'm like, Dad, you're making that up. That can't be real. Like, there's no way this Afro-French person from like the 1750s did all these things. And then I actually rediscovered him again when I was older, now programming these works. And I'm like, oh, wow, he was right. But to answer your question, he started off as many, because when we speak about Black composers back in time when slavery was still active, you know, a lot of these composers were biracial. And because of that, they were able to walk in circles that other people of color were not able to, you know. So Joseph Bologne.
Just before we go on, so in these circles, we're talking in Paris, we're talking in the European capitals in the 18th century.
Yeah, and his father was a slave owner, and his mother was a slave from the Guadeloupe Islands. And I believe his mother died, and his father brought the Chevalier to France, and with the idea of him becoming a part of the French aristocratic society, you know. And he really just shook things up. He was, early in life, he gained a prominence as one of the best fencers in France. And there is this story where he was rising in like the ranks of fencers, and he beat one of the best fencers around, you know. And at that point, he switched gears and decided to turn his attention towards violin. Then he was a violin prodigy, and he was really rising up through the ranks of French society to the point where he was on track to be the leader of, I believe, is the Paris Opera House or the orchestra, one of those groups. But the prima donna, the lead singer of that group, went and said she refused to perform in this group if she was going to be under the baton of a Black conductor. So that's and we see this a lot in the lives of Black artists, where there's this kind of ceiling that they reach sometimes. Some of them can break through it, some of them can't, some of them have to find a different path. But even after that, he didn't let that deter him, you know. And after that experience, he helped the war effort. He led his own legion of soldiers through, I can't remember which war it was.
It was the French Revolution.
I was gonna say it was the French Revolution. Cool. Yeah, it was the French Revolution that he led them through, and he just had a great life. He was a pretty prolific composer. Unfortunately, during the French Revolution, when there was lots of, you know, people were moving away from this obsession with the bourgeois class, and a lot of his works were burned or destroyed. So there's lots of works from him that were not discovered or available. But this opera, luckily, I believe, is the only surviving opera of his, and there's even some scenes that are missing from it. But we have the majority of it. And for this concert, we're doing a little excerpt. We're doing the overture, and we're doing 3 of the scenes from the opera.
And can you describe just a little bit what that might be stylistically? Like, what are some anchors of other composers or other pieces that people might compare it to?
Yeah, so I think if you heard this music out in the wild, you would say, "Hey, is that Mozart?" It's very much in that sound world, you know. And often, you know, he's often called the Black Mozart, and you know, a lot of people are unhappy with that coinage because, you know, for one, he was born before Mozart, so and two, you know, it really does a disservice to his journey and his world. But so you're going to hear what you would normally hear from a traditional classic opera. There's the one of the scenes we're doing called Ariette. There's a section in there that almost sounds like from it could have been from the what was it? Not the Queen of the Night aria, but it could have been from one of Mozart's arias. You know, there's this triplet passage of the vocalists just singing by themselves. So lots of these pieces you hear from this little the Chevalier opera suite, you would really hear reminiscent of Mozart.
Anything else you'd like to add about like what the audience might expect from your performance later this month?
There's a lot on this program. Actually, it was really hard. I had to really work to shave it down because I've been going to these downtown chamber series concerts for a long while. So it's like when you come back to some place that you really respect and enjoy, you're like, I want to show you everyone. I want to show you everything. But we kind of worked with Mark and worked with my group to curate something that's really fun. So like I said before, we have some pieces that are giving homage to Duke Ellington. We have some traditional classical opera. We have some newer pieces that evoke more the sounds of old New Orleans music. We have a composer, Valerie Coleman, who wrote a piece called Old St. Louis that opens up with this giant oboe gliss that's reminiscent. It almost sounds like a trombone doing the second line walking. We're doing so we have one original piece on the concert from our album Lost at Sea, and it's a piece by Zachary Green, and it's called Weaker Apart. And this is probably one of my favorite pieces from the album that we recorded a couple years ago, and it's really kind of intense. I'll talk more about the actual programmatic elements of it at the concert itself, but it's a really modern but accessible piece that I really love. And then we have a really big, bombastic ending planned in the form of a Camino Real. It should be a really fun thing.
All right, Dominic, this is a great place to wrap up. Again, we're excited to have you to make your debut. Again, these concerts are March 12th and 13th at Park Central. I'll put some links below. And of course, you go to our website, join the mailing list to stay up to date. And we'll see you again soon. And thanks again for making time, Dominique.
Oh, thank you for having me.